You know, I really felt bad for the city of Houston at the tail end of 2017 because you had the impact of what was a Hurricane Harvey, all types of devastation, lives lost, lives ruined, families ruined, and all of this. And in those type of circumstances and situations, people do look for positive distractions, and one of those positive distractions can be their sports teams. It can be. It's one of the nice relationships that these teams can have with the communities and vice versa, is they can lean on each other and help each other in times of need. And clearly, the community of Houston had a time of need. Well, thank God they had the Houston Astros who went on to win the World Series, because the Houston Texans sure as hell didn't bring any of that on the football field as the 2017 season played out. Yikes. You talk about a season that looked like it could go sideways because of some of the off-the-field stuff that was not the fault of the football team or anything like that, that still at one point in time looked like it had the promise of the potential of what could be, especially with the revelation of Deshaun Watson and what he was doing at the quarterback position, that led ultimately to the disappointment and the squandering of a season and just a lost bad year. That's just how these things work out sometimes. When you look at this Houston Texans team in 2017, it's hard not to feel bad for them. Because on the one hand, what went right for them? You look at it. You had DeAndre Hopkins had a bounce-back season, a really, really good year, former first-round pick in 2013. Then the guy they took number 1 overall in 2014, Jadeveon Clowney, pieced together another nice season, I would say probably his best season as an NFL player. Still not Aaron Donald or Khalil Mack. Thank you. Of course I'm going to work that in. But Jadeveon Clowney had another really nice season. And while he might never be that creme de la creme defensive player in the National Football League, you could do a lot worse than taking a guy number 1 overall and having him make a bunch of Pro Bowls throughout his career. And Clowney looks like he is on that type of career trajectory, career path finally. He has figured it out, pieced it together, and he's become a star. And then, of course, you have the massive revelation of Deshaun Watson, the guy that the organization made that big move from 27-12 up in round 1 to go get the national champion from Clemson. And here he was, once he got the opportunity. I mean, he was a star. Point blank period from moment number 1. Straight from the jump, he was a star. He looked like he was going to change the entire trajectory of that organization. And the, 6 or whatever starts he made, he looked like he could be that dude. He absolutely looked like he could be potentially the long sought-after franchise quarterback for this team that's never had one since they came into being in 2002. It looked like better days were ahead. And then I do have to point out, even though it's not directly football related, the awesome work that J.J. Watt did with his fundraising, all the millions of dollars that was raised for hurricane relief and the hurricane victims was truly awesome to see. Hats off to him and making it his mission to raise all that money. Hats off to all the people that donated to that worthy cause. You know, decent people around the world, thank you for the heart that you showed. J.J. Watt and the Houston community and people all around the world, frankly. I mean, it was a wonderful thing to see. But unfortunately, not a lot in general went right on the football field for this team. First off, Bill O'Brien somehow looked at his team after the preseason and determined that Tom Savage was more ready to start at the NFL level than Deshaun Watson. I don't give a crap what you say. He looked at it, and he started Tom Savage the first half of that first game, and you saw the train wreck of disaster that was. And then you saw Deshaun Watson, when he came in, the difference that was made, how explosive that offense was, how relevant that team was. And you're like, what the hell, dude? What did you see that nobody else saw? What did you see that made you think that it was better to start Tom Savage than Deshaun Watson? Even if you want to say Watson didn't look great in the preseason, he had those flaws. Dude, you traded up from 27-12 to get him for a reason, in part because Tom Savage sucks and everybody knows it, including you, because you coach him, you son of a bitch. And you started him the first game of the year? That should have instantly gotten you fired, especially once everybody saw what Deshaun Watson actually did. But then it didn't matter. because injuries wreck this team. Not just in the quantity of injuries, but more in the quality of the players that are injured. You lose your two best defensive players, J.J. Watt, future Hall of Famer, Whitney Merciless, one of the more underrated defensive players and edge rushers in all of the National Football League. Didn't you lose him on the same game? Watt with that freakish knee injury, and then wasn't Merciless with the bicep or tricep injury? And then if that wasn't enough, you thought maybe you had enough juice left on the team, and then Deshaun Watson tears up his knee in practice, tears his ACL in a non-contact situation in a practice, not a game. We're not talking about a game. We're talking about practice. Practice. And he tore his knee up. And at that point in time, you knew the season was shot for this team. It's a tough situation. And you lose guys like that. And I don't care who you are. It's going to be really, really hard to give a crap at that point. You're all out of F's to give. And the Texans clearly were all out of F's to give. And frankly, they just didn't have the talent to be able to compete at that point in time. And they really didn't the rest of the year. So now you look ahead and you think about the whole mess that's going on in terms of this alleged power struggle between General Manager Rick Smith and Bill O'Brien and who's going to stay and who's going to go. You see reports talking about Bill O'Brien's going to go up to Bob McNair and say, it's either Rick Smith or it's me, and you got to choose one of us. And then you've got Rick Smith saying he needs to take a personal leave to be able to take care of his wife. So it looks like Bill O'Brien may have potentially won the power struggle. And it's like, what the hell did you win? I know some people are going to talk about Bill O'Brien as a good coach, and maybe in certain aspects he is, but in other aspects, is he really? Is he really? I'm just saying. It feels like you're celebrating winning a participation ribbon for winning 20th place in the 4th grade mile at your Presidential Fitness Day. That's what it feels like. But nonetheless, it'll be interesting to see what happens with the whole front office situation come this offseason. But looking at the Houston Texans now, you've got $57 million in salary cap space. You have somebody like a Brian Cushing, who, of course, himself got hurt again. Maybe he'll be a cap casualty. Maybe he can clear out some more room. But you got to start looking ahead. You've got guys like Xavier Su'a-Filo and Jonathan Joseph are free agents. Are you going to re-sign one or both of those guys? Then you're looking down the road. Do you need to start thinking about locking up guys like Jadeveon Clowney, Bernardrick McKinney, Kareem Jackson, and Kevin Johnson, as their deals will be coming up soon? Do you need to use some of that cap space to start locking them up? I would assume getting Jadeveon Clowney wrapped up before he hits free agency next year would be a relatively big priority, and frankly, it should be. So there's some cap space, not a ton, but it's not like necessarily this team needs to spend a ton in cap space in the open market, maybe to plug a hole here and there. But as much as anything else, they need to keep some of their core players intact, and getting guys like Clowney and McKinney and maybe Su'a-Filo signed long-term might be a step in the right direction in that way. Because ultimately, the number one thing that's going to be important for this organization this offseason is to get healthy. They need J.J. Watt to get back and get healthy and actually be able to stay on the field. Because the past couple of years he hasn't been able to, and that's been disappointing. One of the biggest stars, one of the best defensive players in the league, has been really a non-factor over the course of the past 2 NFL seasons. They need Whitney Merciless to come back and be the force off of the edge that he has been. And most importantly of all, they need Deshaun Watson to show that he's not just going to be another RG knee. They need him to come back and show that he can be healthy and he can do some of what he did in those 6 or so starts in 2017 throughout the course of an entire 16-game season. Because here's what I will say. While everybody gets caught up with their head in the clouds about Deshaun Watson and how great and awesome he was, I think weren't they 3-3 with him as a starter, and the wins that they had and the big numbers that he put up were against some bad defenses or defenses that weren't playing very well at the time. So it's kind of like fool's gold a little bit. You know, he made some big plays, but he still had times he was erratic, still times he wasn't great. There's still a lot of work there. And then you have to worry about how this is going to impact his development, the fact that he blew out his damn knee and he's going to be focusing on rehabbing as much as anything else. So it's frustrating for this Texas team. And what's even worse as you look ahead to the offseason, particularly the draft, it's going to be important to get healthy and keep some of the core guys in place because you're not going to get a lot of help from the draft. That first-round pick was traded to move up last year to get Deshaun Watson. That second-round pick that you had was traded in the Brock Osweiler salary dump to the Cleveland Browns. Think about that. The Texans invested a first-round pick last year and technically a first and second-round pick this year into the quarterback position. One, to get a guy that played less than half the season for them in Deshaun Watson, and the other guy that they had given way too much over way too damn many years to stink up the joint last season, so that way they had to dump him off on somebody else and give up a second-round pick to do so. So this team's got 2 third-round picks, a 4th, a 6th, and a 7th. There is not a ton of help coming out of this draft for the Texans. There just isn't. In terms of what could you say that they would maybe need offensively, defensively, I look at the offense and I say they're probably okay with Miller and Foreman as their 1-2 punch at the running back position, but I feel like they could use a better playmaker at the tight end position. I feel like they could use some help on the offensive line, specifically at tackle with the trade of Dwayne Brown to the Seattle Seahawks. Defensively, they probably could use some depth on that defensive line, and especially in that linebacking core with the injuries they've had, some of the people that might be gone in the future. This is a team that does need to at least reload depth, but again, I don't know how much impact they're going to get out of the draft because they don't have a first or second round pick. It doesn't mean that they can. It doesn't mean that they won't. It's just, it's tough to put your eggs in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round baskets. Oh, and they don't even have a 5th round pick. But it's really costly when you have to make the big move up to get a quarterback and then he blows out his knee and then you had to give up a 2nd round pick to get rid of the guy you had given big money to the season before who absolutely sucked that you couldn't wait to get rid of. It makes you wonder, even though Bill O'Brien might have won the battle for now, if he's going to lose the war and lose his job after the 2018 season, because it might not get a whole lot better for this Texans team.